Like the rest of the population, I indeed watched Saltburn when it reared its somewhat disturbing head in 2023. But whilst many found Barry Keoghan drinking Jacob Elordi's bathwater, or Barry Keoghan doing very questionable things in the garden and to Mother Nature herself, or Barry Keoghan dancing around Saltburn Manor with his little Barry in full show as the most disturbing things to take away from the film, I had one other scene that really stuck with me long after I finished watching. This scene showed Jacob Elordi's Felix, someone who was characterised by his elite social class, talking to one of his friends about the idea of inviting Keoghan's Oliver to a party. However, his friend, assumingly from a similar social background, comments on Oliver's social upbringing. She claims that Ollie doesn't belong with her or Felix or any of their other elite friends because he shops at Oxfam, something that signifies his lower class, and an indicator of his incompatibility to interact with such highly esteemed individuals. It would seem that in 2007, the year in which Saltburn was set, charity shops not only didn't meld with the upper classes, but served as an active antithesis to upper class fashion, with Oliver's secondhand clothes preventing him from assimilating with his higher class peers. It was this, not any of the things that Barry Keoghan chose to do on the set of Saltburn, that really shocked me as a student going to a similar style of university to Oxford, where here the interest to buy from charity shops seems to be at the forefront of everybody's minds. Nowadays, for me and many students I know, charity shops are the primary source for new fashion, and any sort of social stigma that they once held has been completely removed. The fact that only 18 years ago, the entire social understanding of what the charity shop represented was inverse to what it is today is crazy to me. So I thought it could be really interesting to look into what charity shopping means for one's social status in 2025, and whether or not it really has started to disintegrate the class divide in recent times. So how did we move from the attitudes expressed in 2007 to those in 2025? What has actually changed? To understand the rise of charity shops as this class levelling force, we really need to start by looking at what has been falling, and that is the luxury brand. It would seem that over the last couple of years, designer fashion brands have started to lose their grip on the average consumer, where they once represented the pinnacles of status and style, but are now starting to face many struggles, both economically and culturally. In 2024, it was reported that shares in Kering, owner of luxury labels including Gucci, Balenciaga and Yves Saint Laurent, hit a 7-year low after reporting that income in the second half of the year will be down 30% after an already 42% drop in the first half. This would seem to point to the fact that certain social factors, such as the increasing cost of living, has made these brands increasingly inaccessible. In the article, The Decline of Luxury Brands, it reports that all luxury brands have raised their prices to an inaccessible range, increasing them from 5 to 20%, and further reducing the number of potential buyers. Where in today's world, as more and more people financially struggle, extravagant purchases have become less sustainable, with such pricing strategies starting to show its flaws. This can be seen in the New York Times as well, who argue that luxury brands of all kinds have become obscenely, disgracefully, inconceivably costly, and the price hikes we've seen are steeper than what inflation would dictate. In their words, luxury has become a death spiral, and it's really not hard to see why. And with a decade of unchecked growth and brand inflation, these companies have begun to collapse under the weight of their own exclusivity. Where they once represented a symbol of status, they are now becoming out of touch, out of reach, and ultimately out of style. So while these high-end brands have started to feel outdated, we've seen a rise in a very different underdog, that of the vintage shops. They are a growing force that not only offers affordability, but also a sense of authenticity and cultural relevance that these larger brands are seemingly starting to lose. And these aren't only the reflections of financial graphs and data, but also seems to be the typical consumer experience, with many shoppers also reporting similar ideas. As one shopper comments, "People my age don't tend to go to the Gucci store or the Louis Vuitton store. We want to find it elsewhere, in a vintage store." And we can see why this is. Rather than being only for the privileged few, charity shops have become sites of inclusivity, an opposing force to the sterility and £1,000 price tag of the luxury store. As this shopper continues, she claims that there's a new age of retail emerging that's not as transactional as those stores where you go in, everything is $1,000, has amazing customer service, but you can't chat to them about your day or where the best local coffee shop is. They're there to sell you things. And this is a really clear indicator in what consumers want from a shopping experience. They're not just there for the bargain. They want something that is more than a shop, a place where consumerism can begin to mingle with community. In Birdwell and Paget's report measuring the social value of charity shops, they see that the charity shops are another significant site of social mixing and interaction in local communities for people from different backgrounds. This is reinforced by Evans' paper, Shopping for Good, where it's claimed that people's social class, ethnicity, religion and region are not statistically significant predictors of their use of charity shops. If you simply look at the difference between a charity shop and that of a luxury store, the differences speak for themselves. If you look at this Gucci shop, for example, you see an overwhelming sense of sterility. With the neatly arranged clothes organised perfectly, you see a message of a class-based aspiration. The mannequins are styled down to perfection, a glimpse of the exclusive life you could lead, where your cashmere jumper matches seamlessly to the fitted trousers around your waist. The charity shop, on the other hand, is far more eclectic, almost whispering back to a warm nostalgia from long ago. An array of different fashion niches being brought together to represent the differences in the people expected to shop there. The messages here, plastered onto the walls, are there to inspire a very different type of lifestyle. Not one ruled by exclusivity, but for a strive of community. By shopping here, you're not only helping yourself find a bargain, but you're aiding a community that could really benefit from your donation. So far as once being understood as a symbol of stigma, the charity shop has been transformed and represents a more democratic form of fashion consumption, where shopping secondhand isn't going to remind you that your purchase is fueling a class division, but rather it's going to diminish it. With this growing inferiority of labels in mind, Chariot Web has listed 3 reasons why people seem to be shopping more at charity shops. Not only is it down to the cost of living rising, as we've discussed before, but also in a general sense, thrifting as a style is becoming more and more popular. As it discusses in its article Feeling Thrifty, vintage is very in fashion now, and more people are moving away from the mass-produced clothing found on the high street in favour of second-hand clothing they can find for a much fairer price at a charity shop. Vinted, for example, is a great reflection of this wider trend, with the second-hand fashion platform reporting profit for the first time with 61% year-on-year growth in 2023 alone. The Real Technology Innovation Hub furthers this, discussing how younger generations don't want to boast about their latest designer labels. Rather, they are proud to shout about their pre-loved outfit that was a bargain find. So with this in mind, charity shopping is more than just finding affordable clothing, but it also allows for people to find unique and trendy pieces of clothing, ones that aid in their quest to find a fluid style, one that doesn't require a well-known name attached to it. And this leads to the idea that as an overall consumer market, we are no longer solely looking for designer brands, meaning that the wider social outlook contains less of them, and they are therefore less on society's mind. Now, when I compliment a friend on their outfit, I'm no longer bombarded with a response that contains loads and loads of designer labels. Most of the time, they now reply with a simple statement that I thrifted it. So now, for the most part, I'm seeing a humble shift in the attitudes of what we want to wear. An outfit is no longer deemed stylish because it's caked in designer symbols, but rather because the individual wearing it has styled these items well together. So whilst traditionally designer labels served as symbols of status and luxury, as Boinclo observes, trends now lean towards understated elegance, with many consumers opting for pieces that showcase quality craftsmanship rather than overt branding. A survey conducted by WGSN revealed that over 60% of respondents prefer clothing without large logos, indicating a clear move towards discreet fashion choices, where the shift reflects a broader societal change, where consumers are looking for pieces that complement their overall style, as opposed to a form of brand allegiance. And all these reports link perfectly to this overall conversation about charity shops. As the desire for brand recognition decreases, previous stigma about shopping at brandless stores is removed, and therefore charity shops are becoming more and more popular. And another great aspect that these articles highlight is the attraction to buying for quality over allegiance to brand integrity, a branch of consumer desire that is satiated with shopping at charity shops. Because when you think about it, buying secondhand tends to confirm the quality of an item. You know, if you see it on a shelf, it has survived many, many life experiences, whether a party, spillages, even weather conditions. You know that if this thing is on the shelf, it's because it stood the test of time. And with all of this in mind, it really seems that the fashion industry itself is beginning to be disrupted. Long ago was the age of dominance by these luxury brands, and instead this cultural credibility that charity shops offer, which not only is more attractive to the average consumer, but is also widening the margin of who can actually shop there. With charity shops no longer being the backup plan, they are the prime destination, Barbados or Maldives of the consumer's mindset, if you will, and are becoming rare spaces within the retail world of genuine class integration, with the shopper no longer choosing to buy secondhand due to necessity alone, but now rather the thrill to find something really, really sensational, ultimately eroding away the stigma that the charity shop once held in the 2000s. So it would seem that social class is being less rigidly expressed through fashion. But is this a closed case? Can we shut our metaphorical wardrobes on this idea and claim that charity shops have ultimately dissolved any class divide? Unfortunately, it would seem unlikely. Imagine that there's a couple more stale socks at the bottom of your wardrobe that are really preventing those doors from being closed. Whereas one issue is accounted for, many more begin to rise. For one, it seems that this utopia of complete class equality in fashion is not as perfect as it seems. And this is really well summed up by Cherwell, that despite ownership of second-hand goods being less stigmatised and often celebrated in modern fashion landscape, there is still a class divide in how people shop for vintage fashion. Not all second-hand shopping is created equal. With the demand for vintage clothing growing, both dedicated curated vintage stores and online resellers have provided a way for those willing to pay a premium to buy second-hand items through an easier, more tailored shopping experience. In this subtle way, those with more money are able to shop for more desirable clothing pieces and curate their wardrobe to fit an aesthetic more easily. Like with any other fashion trend, the financial opportunity that secondhand shopping provides for retailers cannot be ignored. With many vintage shops, and you know the exact ones I'm talking about, offering similar prices to pre-owned goods as those that were newly owned. As popularity increases, vintage stores can justify hiking the prices up, as consumers, especially those from middle class and upper class backgrounds, are eager to follow a trend. I can't tell you the amount of times I've walked into a charity shop or a vintage shop looking for a great bargain and instead have been slapped in the face with prices upwards of £70 for a jumper that was literally made before I was born. It's ludicrous. It's ridiculous. That's what she said. A great name, by the way, for a news publisher, includes in their article, Charity Shops Depop and the Gentrification of Secondhand Clothes. Secondhand shopping has led to the gentrification of charity shops. Once places of sanctuary for those in need of affordable clothing, now are filled with middle-class students looking for designer brands. In this way, the original purpose of charity shopping has been subverted, where middle-class individuals feel very comfortable and confident shopping there, whilst working-class individuals no longer feel that they can buy their clothes from such sources, instead relying on other sources of clothes shopping, such as fast fashion, for more affordable items of clothing. So in kind of a crazy way, the stigma of charity shopping has been transferred. No longer is Oxfam a buzzword for the lower class. Instead, the higher classes now turn their noses down when someone says they bought something from Primark or Shein. Ironically, phrases like cigarette mum, a term used to describe working class stereotypes, have been used to describe those dressing against recent fashion trends and are choosing to shop at cheaper alternatives to those of vintage. And this type of subversion isn't new. This idea of gentrification of fashion brands is not a new thing in 2025. When you look at brands such as Doc Martens and Dickies, they were originally for the working class, but have now found that because of fashion trends, they can start catering towards middle and upper class consumers instead. Once what was a symbol of working in an industrial setting has now been turned into a middle class style choice. When you go on the Dickies website looking for a pair of trousers, they can charge you upwards of £100. And if you want a new pair of shoes from Doc Martens, prepare to get your wallet out, because they're going to put you back upwards of 200 quid for a pair of working boots. That's literally all it is. Working boots. And when we look at charity shops, this is made even more ironic when we look at where their birth took place. Charity shopping in the UK first became popular after the Second World War. One of the most popular charity shops, Oxfam, first opened its doors in 1947. These shops would take in donations and sell goods at heavily discounted rates compared to original retail prices. The proceeds would then go to a variety of different charitable causes, where naturally the low prices attracted people in need of affordable clothing. Fashion researchers such as Jessica Field look at exactly this. She uses the Oxfam's Broad Street shop as a perfect example, where it offered a novel form of engagement with charity through consumption. She comments how the symbolic value of these retail relations and the practice of charity consumption have constituted a level of social participation and belonging to the organisation that has substituted membership for the majority of the general public. The Salvation Army is another great example of this, who saw their charity shops as a form of class improvement, as elevating lower classes to a higher class standpoint, leading them to a better life by means of accommodation, work and faith. Charity shops were thus born from the idea of social belonging through acts of giving and receiving, not only through donations, but in spirit as well. When you shopped there, it was understood that your purchase stood for more than just yourself. It was a way in which you could help the wider community. And this seems like a massive positive. This is exactly what we were talking about before. The idea that community and consumerism come together when you shop at a charity shop, directly supporting the claim that charity shops put the consumer in community. I swear it works. A great analogy that I came up with that totally does not have any flaws and doesn't actually really work. If you move a couple of the letters around, you can totally get consumerism and community to really work well together. Anyway, but in recent years, this seems to have started to change. When we look back at the examples of charity shops we gave earlier, there are still constant reminders of the community in which you're aiming to help. But I do think it's worth mentioning that when buying from a charity shop today, this act of goodness feels completely removed. Be honest with me, when you were last in a charity shop, what was the leading desire you had? Was it the fact that you genuinely wanted to help other people? Or was it that you were simply following a trend and you found a cheap way to do so? And with this in mind, I think there's a real anxiety beginning to emerge, where charity shopping has become purely transactional, as an opportunity to buy a piece of stylish clothing at a fraction of the cost, and also following the trend, as opposed to going in and buying something for the donation it represents and the community that you genuinely think you can help. So whilst yes, I believe that charity shops have genuinely made fashion more socially fluid and overall less connected with the lower class, I do believe that they're an environment where whispers of class tensions still exist, where trends, prices and perceptions are increasingly being shaped by those who can afford to romanticise the idea of secondhand living, as opposed to those who really rely on it. With this in mind, I'm certain that if Oliver was to be represented in 2025, the clothes in which he chose to wear would still be a massive indicator of his social class. But in this case, Jacob Elordi would not be commenting on the fact that he shops at Oxfam, but instead because he's rocking a shirt from Primark or a jacket from Shein. Because as we've seen, charity shops have done a lot for the fashion community as a whole, and has allowed fashion to become more accessible to many, offering them a way to engage with trends and their own forms of self-expression without the financial burden that was once required to quote-unquote look the part. But there is a risk that they haven't entirely subverted the way in which society understands a physical marker of class. With the rise of charity shopping as a cultural and aesthetic trend beginning to edge out the people who once relied on it the most, working class communities who now no longer feel fully catered to what their needs are. In other words, the fashion may be second-hand, but the class politics are anything but. So, what we're left with is a paradox. Charity shopping in 2025 is both a symbol of progress, but also a subtle reminder of the divisions that still exist quietly underneath the clothes in which we wear. As with anything that becomes popular, especially those things involved within a consumer system, we need to stay critical to how trends that once stood for consumer equity can easily be commodified, gentrified, and restructured to serve those with more power and privilege. Because when secondhand fashion becomes more about aesthetics and trends than the original purpose of the charity shop, there is a risk that these outfits are no longer going to stand for what they once represented. Where the outfit that may sport a stylish jumper with a clunky pair of trousers, my dream aesthetic by the way, may still be able to carry undertones of inequality, reminding us that while fashion can change relatively quickly, social structures are much slower to fade. So the next time you go into a charity shop, try and remember what it was originally for. Whilst you may be finding a pair of trousers or a stylish skirt for an absolute bargain, there is a community who is going to benefit greatly from your donation. And with these ideas, I'm going to love you and leave you. I hope you enjoy this video. It was really fun to film, to research and all of that. If you have any more further contributions or ideas, please leave a comment. I would love to see your opinion on it. If you've got anything else to add, if you've got anything that you maybe didn't agree with, I would love to see what you're thinking. And if you did enjoy the video, please give it a massive thumbs up and also think about subscribing as well. That could be really great. And check out any of the other videos on the channel. They're all similar. They're all about your uni experience and maybe you can learn a thing or two from somewhere else as well. And yeah, I'll hopefully see you very soon. If you've subscribed, then you'll know there'll be a new video on the channel the next time that me or Lewis decide to upload. But anyway, hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day, your evening, or whatever you're doing now. And I can't wait to see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.